And people don't take it seriously. They say, oh, I can make language garbage. Language doesn't mean anything.
Right.
Language is not important. And they end their sentences with whatever.
Right.
And they say, constantly because they want people to affirm them and to pretend that they know what they're talking about,
Right.
even though they themselves don't know what they're talking about. It's a desperate situation, and people make themselves feel good by taking any authority or responsibility or accountability out of the picture of life. And
Right.
then we feel free when we do that, but we are not free. We are dead.
We're going to devote our energies to sports and gardening, all the cultural pursuits as far as they're concerned. In fact, we're going to put the goons to sleep. Meanwhile, we dig.
Greetings and welcome to the Anadromist. This is Burn Power coming to you from Tbilisi, Georgia on a really gray day. But I'm in my newly textured and painted room, as you can see, and I'm enjoying things. It probably echoes a bit in here. I'm going to figure out a way to deal with that at some point, but not right now. Well, today we have another in our series of Anadromous Dialogues, and we'll be talking with Ellis Potter again. And I've been wanting to talk with Ellis. He's been a little bit queasy, under the weather, but he's feeling better and decided to come back on, and we are going to talk about beauty, meaning, art, reality, God, all of these things. So I think you will find this, if you're interested in any of those subjects or all of them, I think you'll find this a rewarding dialogue. Interestingly enough, Ellis and I don't agree on everything. There will be points where he just kind of looks at me going like, and I'm not sure about that, basically. And there'll be times I kind of am wondering how much I agree with him on such. But you know what? That's the point of dialogue, is to have discussions where you try to understand the point someone else is making. And I think we did a really good job of that. So let's enter into the dialogue with Ellis and myself about art, beauty, and meaning.
Well, greetings, Ellis. You're in Basel, Switzerland. I'm in Tbilisi, Georgia. And from our last conversation, I got good feedback. People were saying, we want more Ellis. I think they appreciated your perspective. It's different than many people's perspectives. And I think there is a lot a lot more to dig into over time. And I think that I recommended to you that, or suggested, and you agreed, that we discuss the subject of beauty and the meaning of beauty, the need for beauty in our lives. And I'd heard you talk about that once at L'Abri, and then you sent me the email saying, yes, but you're going to have a definition for me, which I thought was a nice turnaround. So I've been racking my brains to try, I obviously think about it. I even did a lecture on it, but what do I really think beauty and you wanted meaning and beauty as definitions. So you want my definitions now?
Sure.
Okay. So I think both of them are relationships in time. And for me, that has a very specific meaning that they aren't simply static things. It's not, see, we have like facts, but a fact can just be something that's static, that doesn't move in time. 2 + 2 = 4. It's static. It doesn't move in time. Or a photograph of a beautiful natural scene or a person doesn't move in time. And for me, meaning being more the overriding category, with beauty being one of the subsets, Meaning for me is that we look beyond the abstractions and we ask, in time, what is this thing? So if I say 2 + 2 = 4, well, that's really great. But then the question is, well, how does that exist in time? So for instance, 2 + 2 = 4, what? And without the what, it remains something that is just like frozen. And so for me, it was like 2 apples + 2 apples = 4 apples, but for how long? If you come back in a year, what do you find? Will one of them have started to grow? Will they all have been disappear or shrivel? Will they be eaten by animals? We don't know. And time, when you factor time into an equation like that, it becomes very different. But I think in terms, we're now living in an era where people are tempted to put everything into images online and to freeze things, or to even want to become like those images. There's a certain operation now, I can't remember the exact name for it, to a cosmetic operation to shave the face, the jawline, to make it look more triangular, so that it looks better on TikTok and Instagram. And to me, that would be, and that gets us into the subject of beauty. I think beauty isn't simply an image, but it's a relationship in time. So it has something to do with form, what we can talk about. But so that we might go to a place where there's a natural beauty. We say a mountain is beautiful, although that, I think we would both agree, is too simplistic a term for what a mountain is. It isn't simply beautiful. I think, we bring in words like the sublime and such. Or we might see a person, a woman, and say she's beautiful. But more likely, we're seeing a photograph of that person. And once you start to investigate who the person is, you may find that the person doesn't, especially if they're in the image business of, say, fashion modeling or something, doesn't correspond to the beauty. So you start to see that there can be a disjunct between the surface and the meaning, what's inside. So the beauty, the meaning, is what's inside. And it's the same with beauty. There's a superficial perfection of forms as we may see it. And what people see as a perfection of forms will be different in different cultures, I think, although we'll all agree on certain things. But it isn't simply the forms. It's what's inhabiting the forms in time. And that's how I kind of define it as myself. I mean, we can talk further, but I don't know. What do you think about that sort of definition? I don't know if you agree or disagree or...
I think in terms of absolute reality and not particular reality. And then I try to fit the particular things into the absolutes.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in order to understand meaning, relationships, and beauty, we need to go outside of time.
Mm-hmm.
That within time, we don't really get a basic picture of what it is, or a cause, or a validity.
Mm-hmm.
It's just all up for grabs.
Right.
But if we go outside of time and we ask, what was reality like before there was time?
Mm-hmm.
Then we see that there is God, who is a Trinity, 3 persons, and that the persons of God are not interchangeable. They're not the same. They're different from each other, as well as being the same in some ways. And they're so different that in some ways they are opposite to each other.
Mm-hmm.
For instance, the Son obeys and goes, and the Father commands and sends. So they're opposite. And in our cultures, in most of our cultures, we think of the one who obeys and goes as the junior partner. that Jesus would be a sort of a junior apprentice god waiting to get his license to practice divinity.
Right.
But he isn't the beta God, he's alpha God and omega God.
Mm-hmm.
And so outside of time, there are relationships with things that people that are not exactly the same, that are different. And the meaning is not in themselves. That would be a self-referential meaning. And in the self-referential, which is a very popular criteria for art, there is no meaning. And therefore, very possibly no beauty, depending on how you define. And many people are allergic to definitions because they think they are limiting. And of course, they are limiting, but necessarily limiting, because if there are no limits, there is no meaning.
Right.
So I like to draw a circle and then put everything that is what we're trying to define in the circle and everything else outside of the circle. And the circle might be very big. So if you're defining art, you find that the circle is very, very big, and all kinds of things fit into it. But some things do not fit in. And that's what is objectionable to the postmodern person, where everything must be respected and accepted and regarded as an integral part of the whole. But this is not true outside of time, because Jesus is not the Father. He is different. He goes, he obeys. The Father commands and sends. And so that must be true inside of time, because God created time. Now, if you don't believe in God, then all that is nonsense, and we just have to work it out from our own situation and perspective. But I don't believe that. I believe that God gives us from himself an understanding, a meaning, a way of coping with these questions, and that without God, we really don't have such a thing. We just do the best we can, and it's never stable, and it differs from one culture to another. So the idea that we have beauty and some things are not beautiful is objectionable.
Right.
It's offensive to many people, because everything should be accepted. But that is death, I'm sorry to say, but it really is death. And our cultures, especially Western cultures, are moving more and more rapidly toward death, toward the loss of meaning, because everything becomes the same. Particularly men and women become interchangeable,
right,
which has the implementation of this idea has produced less marriage, less sex, and less children. And if that continues, our cultures will simply disappear.
Right.
There won't be any replacement of them. So it's a very severe situation, but most people don't recognize it. They're not afraid or threatened or anything. And they should be. Someone should help people to wake up. Maybe we can to some extent. So beginning with the supernatural, with the absolute, with the reality outside of time, then we get a picture and a pattern from God that gives us beauty and meaning. And beauty is something like appropriateness, things fitting together, things belonging to one another, but not being the same as one another, this kind of dynamic situation. So nothing has beauty in itself. It has beauty in relationships, which is the same as meaning, because meaning equals relationships. And truth equals fact plus meaning. Truth does not equal fact. In the scientific paradigm, in the scientific view of the world, truth equals fact.
Right.
And science is good and right, but there's more than science in reality. There are emotions and various kinds of attitudes and cultural peculiarities. There's more than science, and that more is meaning. So science in itself is fact, which is very good. We need fact, but to have truth, we need to have meaning as well. And so if meaning equals relationships, it means that nothing has meaning in itself.
Right.
Which is very offensive to most Western people.
Right.
Because meaning is not something that people understand. It's one of the words as opposed to the words.
What do you mean?
And it just means meaning plus, meaning I get strokes, meaning everyone goes, without having any idea what I'm talking about, because I don't have any idea of what I'm talking about. It's just a buzzword.
Right.
If I say meaning, I get buzzes and I like it. And so I say it again.
Right.
But I have no idea what it means.
Right.
Or if I say beauty, I get buzzes from lots of people. And I like that. It feels good. So I say it again. But I still don't know what it means, no matter how many times I say it.
Right.
And no matter how I feel about it. I still don't know what it means. And we don't really communicate. Because if we say, for me, this is what it means. Well, what about the rest of us? What does it mean together?
Right.
If it's just for me, then it's not for you. It's self-referential, which precludes meaning. And this is a very common practice, that people think in terms of themselves rather than in terms of relationships, and avoid the relationships and the stresses and the disagreements and the variety that come from relationships and are self-referential. This is very common among people, and I find it especially among Christians. And people feel that it's a form of humility to say, for me, because it's I'm not dictating what reality is for anybody else. But it's quite a false humility, because it denies the possibility of truth, which can be shared.
Right.
We just sort of grin at each other like chimpanzees, and there's no actual communication or understanding going on. So we need to be very careful about our language, that we, Jesus told us, say what we mean and mean what we say, that we let our yes be yes and our no be no, that we be hot or cold. Because if we're not definite, he will spit us out of his mouth, which is probably not a good thing.
Right.
But it's a threat, you see, that Jesus gives us, and people don't take it seriously. They say, oh, I can make language garbage. Language doesn't mean anything. Language is not important. And they end their sentences with whatever. Right. And they say, you know, constantly, because they want people to affirm them and to pretend that they know what they're talking about, even though they themselves don't know what they're talking about. It's a desperate situation, and people make themselves feel good by taking any authority or responsibility or accountability out of the picture of life. And then we feel free when we do that. But we are not free. We are dead. And you see that more and more. And then we have the death of relationships, the death of culture, the death of trust, the death of marriage.
Well, when I was talking about relationships, for me, that is an absolute, for instance, in everything, and time, I recognize what you're saying about God being outside of time, but also inside of time as well, obviously, being everywhere. But I see that, for instance, if I even look at science, if you go all the way down to the subatomic particles and all the gluons and quarks and such, the basis of reality isn't these little things just sitting there. It's the fact, and the mystery is that they're in relationship to each other. And so people will sometimes say something to me like, well, we're just atoms. We should just all fall apart. And I'm going, no, we're not atoms. We're relationships. And relationship is the core. And I think if we go back to, in the beginning was the word, the logos, that basically is saying that everything is a relationship. And so that relationship, the relationship of God within the Trinity, which we obviously is very difficult to understand it if we can grasp it at all. Nevertheless, that's an absolute. That relationship is foundational. So for me, what I see is that since the say the rise of modern science, as opposed to the original scientific push in the 15th, 16th, 17th, 18th centuries, up through then, there was room for God in science. But at a certain point, the stuff, the matter, the energy became the primary thing that was the basis of reality. And so science, they couldn't find God because they were only looking at space and matter. Whereas there was this, and they didn't have, the original scientists of the Renaissance and such didn't have a problem with time because they lived within it perfectly. But they created something that tilted and slowly created the world we're in today, in which it seems like so many of our activities are either there to basically reject the effects of time through speed, through, right now we're rejecting the effects of time to a degree by talking this way, because obviously to actually get together and talk would take a long time to get to past this. We can accept this. If this is the only relationship people have, though, and for many people it is, I mean, we're fortunate we've met each other, but for many people, they haven't met each other. So this thing becomes the only reality they have. And it is this, we've created a more abstract world. On the other side, while we're rejecting the effects of time, I think we're trying to become, in some sense, the absolute. So that drugs, especially the psychedelic drugs, it's all about freezing and stopping time and trying to enter into that timeless state. But even the music now, so much of the electronic music no longer has, narrative is an ugly word for so many people, no longer tells a story. It no longer goes someplace. Rather, it just is a... And whether it stops or starts is inconsequential. While you're there, time stops. And that's like modern electronic dance music, which is so much of the music we hear in our world these days. So for me, when I say a relationship in time, for me, we are living in this world where we're trying to pretend time doesn't have an effect. I mean, you see this most clearly in something like love, where the time element is the most difficult part. Anyone can be attracted to a person, but the commitment element and the time it takes to decide whether you should commit, that's the time element. And commitment for postmodern people, or whatever we are now, is the part that they're like most phobic about. And so for me, beauty, it has to take place as a relationship. Meaning is a relationship. And I mean, I was just listening to a guy talking about, and I'll let you comment on this as well, but a neuroscientist talking about how actually we're constructing our reality. He was saying we live in basically a mass hallucination, to which I said, that doesn't make sense. The idea of constructing your reality, because, I lived in Alaska, we have bears there. The bears really don't care about our ideas of constructing reality. And when I would take people on tours to go see them, first thing I would have to do is tear down all of their presuppositions that they're constructions about bears. The bears aren't your friends. The bears don't care what you want to do. They have what they want to do. They're not living in their reality. They're living in reality. And you have to get on the same page very quickly. And then you can go to a place and observe the bear, and there'll be harmony. There'll be a relationship. But if you live inside of your own personal constructed reality, which many people do these days, then you're not going to find that harmonious, beautiful relationship. or at least the possibility of it. Does that make any?
I would have to ask you a lot of questions.
Yes, I understand.
To get a picture, I don't get a picture yet.
Okay. So, well, like I said, I think that God made us to be in time. God didn't make us to be outside of time. And I think one of the original temptations is to be like God. So I think that we've constructed devices that are there to both, I think, kind of try to fix the effects of the fall, but also to be like God. So I think our media helps us to at least have the illusion that we're acting like God. But for everything we do, that is, we can't ultimately escape the effect of time. Many people live as if time is an enemy. I don't. I learned many years ago that I have to swim in time. I have to live in it, go with it. Don't try. I mean, obviously, to get here from Alaska, I had to take an airplane, which is a device we use to basically change our relationship in time to what in the past would have taken a very, very long time to travel. But we do suffer for these effects. For instance, we suffer from, well, the amount of energy it takes. We suffer from things like jet lag. We suffer from, even in our relationships. I remember when I lived in New York City and my mother lived in the San Francisco Bay Area, she would expect me to come, particularly during Christmas time, to come visit her every year, which I soon realized was a nightmare of travel during that time. And I eventually told her, I can't do this because it's not that I don't love you. It's just that it's just this mass migration of people moving from one place to another at this one moment, pretending as if, say, the 3,000 miles between didn't exist. And so I think we live in a world where we just want, well, how can I explain it? Where the effect of time, which I think was, like I said, I think it was a mistake of the scientists. They just simply didn't really, and time not meaning the clock. So that's just duration. An hour can pass for all of us. And that's a measurement of time. But what to me matters is what's inside the hour. So if I am having a very good day, say I had a very good piece of news, or let's do it like this. Someone has just fallen in love. Someone else is having a normal day working at McDonald's, and someone else just lost someone they love. They're living within that hour. Each of those people are going to have a very, very different period, a very different duration. What's inside is time, whereas that hour is just a measurement. And I think we've mistaken, you'll often hear people start to talk about time and look at the clock. And I'm saying, it's not the clock. It is our relationship within time. And the thing about time is it's not, time is always personal. It's each thing's personal relationship with everything else. So it's my relationship to, the world outside of me is very different than someone else's relationship because they don't have all of my experiences. Nevertheless, there are some real serious absolutes here. So, for instance, I tend to think that evil and love operate within time very differently. And I've used this analogy before, but I'll use it again because it's a good way to make the point. If you're walking down a city street and you say to yourself, what can I do to cause someone evil, or what can I do to someone that is negative and bad that they will remember for the rest of their lives? Well, the list is almost endless. You can walk up and slap them. You can walk up and comment on their nose. You can hit them. You can shoot them. You can push them into traffic. Almost endless things. The things that will disturb their relationship with everything. It's just, if someone comments on certain things, you just don't even, but if you turn it the other way around and say, I'm walking down a busy city street, what can I do to genuinely show love to someone? Suddenly, if you just walk up to someone you don't know and start talking to them, that might not be a good thing. If you give money to someone on the street, that might not be a good thing. It might, but it might not. About the only things you can do that you can probably say is an unreserved good is if you prevent an evil from happening to them, like you pull them out of the line of a car, if you stop them from being beaten up on the street, because love takes time. Whereas evil, I think the most evil person in the world would be the person who could say, I want what I want and I want it now, and have the power to have it manifested immediately. So someone with a lot of money who could just simply say, I need this, and it comes. The closer you can get to that immediate self-fulfillment, the more evil you would be. Because I think evil works against time. And that is to say, I think God gave us time as a medium to swim in. But it's also very tempting for us to want to get to eliminate all the effects of the fall. That isn't to say that all of the things that, like driving in a car or flying in a plane or talking on the internet, are evils, but it is to say that nevertheless they all have a cost that comes with them. They're not free things, so that they eat up energy. They eat, or another way of putting it is that time, evil seems to go with entropy and increase entropy. And love seems to be the only thing I know that works against entropy. So in other words, so to me, good then is that which increases the meaning within relationships. And bad is that which destroys it. So you can see all the 10 Commandments as things which destroy relationships. So I don't know if that clarifies what I'm talking about anymore, but
no.
Well, if you have any specific question, feel free. If otherwise, we can we'll go back to the subject of beauty. But
I suppose you want me to add something to this conversation.
No.
Oh, okay. Then I don't have any questions.
Okay. Yeah. Well,
I could add something, but I'm not sure if I could add anything, because the things that I say are so radical that they're very difficult to hear.
Right.
And they just pass by a lot of people. So to some extent, I waste my time when I say things. But sometimes...
No. I'm just trying to find the place where we meet. And I think we meet at the point of the absolutes of God. And I think that point is relationship, which God has given us. And I think that's both within time and outside of time. That our relationship with God is the thing that connects us outside of time. Does that sound like it works?
That sounds like it works, but it sounds quite different from what you said before.
No, not really.
Okay.
Because I'm looking at time, like I said, I'm looking at our life here. But I'm also looking at, how can I know that I think that God has given us enough clues here. And one of the clues is to use the time we have. And so, and I think time is less it can have aspects of being an enemy, certainly, but it also has aspects of being a tremendous gift that we can work within it. So I think that for me, time isn't an absolute. God is the absolute. But within God, we see relationship, and we see that God has given us primarily, obviously through space and matter as well, that we have relationships that we form. But I think the modern world has cut off the effects of time. And now, once that's been done, which it's been primarily done already, we're now cutting off the effects of space as well. to, again, I think it's to become like God, to be the imitation of the absolute, so that we're looking for this knowledge. It's like, what was it? T.S. Eliot said that part of it is to come around back to where we started to know the place for the first time, except there's a good way to do that, and there's an imitation. I think we'll eventually, as we get closer to unlocking more secrets of the universe, secrets of biology, secrets of consciousness and such, we will eventually get back. We're trying to get back to the garden, but eventually what we don't realize in our pride is that we still don't know quite yet what the sword the angel has is to prevent us from becoming like God on earth. So again. But what do you mean? So how does beauty fit into this concept, your concept of the absolute? Let's go back to what you were talking about.
As I said, beauty is relationships and appropriateness, things that belong together and complement each other, but are not the same.
Right.
And that would be an objective, basic understanding of beauty. And then there would be infinite variety within that basic definition. And there would be, in people's experience, something that we could call taste. And taste is viewing reality from my own point of view in terms of me. When I lecture about art, sometimes people come to me after and say, well, I don't know very much about art, but I know what I like.
Right.
And I think, okay, congratulations. After great research, you have discovered what you like. But actually, it isn't that great an accomplishment, because everything, every living thing has taste. I live in Switzerland, and so I have to grow red geraniums in my windows. And they know what they like. They like the sunshine. You can see them follow it across when it goes. They love that. And of course, they like water as well. And so they know what they like. They don't like dry, and they don't like dark. And they do like that, and they do like light.
Right.
So on that level of knowing what I like, I am similar to a geranium. Or even worse, if you make bread, you use yeast.
Right.
And in order to use it effectively, you have to know what it likes. And it likes wet and sweet and maybe a little bit oily. It does not like salt.
Right.
It hates salt. And it just shrivels up and won't function at all if there's salt. So the yeast cells know what they like. So my point with the yeast cells is that when we raise ourselves, as pardon the pun with yeast, that we raise ourselves to the level of a one-celled asexual organism. And I don't believe that's what God made us to be. I think he made us to be different from that. But we love to reduce ourselves to that because it's much more comfortable and much less responsible. And so it feels good. But death feels good, and life often feels bad. So we have to choose life, as it says in the scripture, but we can coast and float into death following what makes us feel good, what we like. The Romans had a proverb that said, de gustibus non est disputandum, which means taste is not discussable, which means you cannot talk about it profitably. So if you say to me that your favorite color is red, that cannot be discussed. I cannot say, you're wrong, it should be blue, because your taste is your taste. But as I think you've said, it doesn't produce reality. And it doesn't change reality, and it doesn't define reality. It's only self-referential.
Right.
It's your taste. And it's not wrong to have taste, but I think Christians and everybody else should make two confessions. And one is that there are things that are noble and appropriate and well done and well crafted and deserving respect and admiration. And I really don't like them. They're not my taste. And the other is that there are things that are kitschy and sloppy and unworthy, and they're just my favorite things in all the world. They're very much my taste. I like them. I don't have any reason to like them, but I do like them, which these two confessions teach us that our taste is bad.
Right.
That's going to be very unpopular to your audience.
Well, actually, in my series called The Cute and the Creepy, I'm kind of going after the conditioning we have now to accept big-eyed creatures that we see everywhere in the media, and people identify themselves now as being cute. And I'm saying, no, we have to question where this came from. This isn't like an eternal thing, you know. But maybe go on and talk about how you see beauty in relationship to art, or in relationship to kitsch, or meaning in relationship to these things.
I would not separate art from kitsch.
The spectrum.
My definition of art is quite shocking and a bit primitive and universal.
Yes, I remember. It's
Okay.
anything that can be made, essentially, right? Something like that.
No, it isn't. Art is deliberate human action, which is a very large circle. Art is not a thing. Art is an action. There are things that are relics or evidence that art has happened, like a painting or an emotion that is caused by something that we choose to do. But the art itself is from arto facto, made by the arm, going back to Latin. So anything that people do is art, if they intend it. Accidents are not art.
Right.
So if you spill the wine on the tablecloth and it makes a stain in the shape of the Taj Mahal, that is not art. It is accident. But if you cut out that piece of cloth and put it in a frame and hang it on the wall, that action is art.
Right.
Because you are responsible and you are a change agent. The contrast with art is not kitsch, but nature.
Okay.
Art is unnatural. It is artificial. And that's what people don't seem to grasp, that art is artificial, which means that nothing God does is art.
Right.
Art is something that people do. And people look at the sunset and say, oh, this is God's art. I say, you misunderstand God and yourself.
Right.
Because we are the ones who make art. God, for instance, made wheat. And the way he made it, it grows along streams mixed with lots of other plants. Human beings say, you, wheat, will grow alone in this field.
Right.
And anyone else who tries to grow there, we will kill. That is violent.
Right.
That is really violent and manipulative because we put our hand on it. But it is what God directs and commands us to do, to name the animals, to have dominion over the earth. And if we couldn't be violent with the wheat, we couldn't have civilization.
Right.
We would be hunter-gatherers. So the wheat field is art because it's not an accident and it's not natural. It's artificial. God doesn't make wheat fields. He made wheat. And then we, by art, make wheat fields.
Right.
So art is the human action of growing wheat, of cooking, of painting, of dancing, of singing, of having a conversation, of balancing the checkbook. This is all art. And then there are subcategories of art, like fine art, practical art, utilitarian art, culinary art, visual art, sonic art. We divide it up into all different categories. But what we tend to do in order to have more control is to choose one or two of those categories and call them art and other things not. But this, as you have said, is an attempt to control and to be like God.
Right.
Which is very, very unhealthy. But if we back up and we let art be art, and we let the circle of art be huge, then we're going to do better. But the circle of art is a circle, and there is inside the circle and outside the circle, which is very offensive to most postmodern people because everything should be accepted. But what is outside the circle is what God does.
Mm-hmm.
Accident and pure imagination with no action.
Mm-hmm.
A dream is not art, or a fantasy is not art. If you write the fantasy down, that is art, the action.
Right.
But if you just have it, that comes to you naturally.
Right.
It's not artificial at all. So I would make the distinction of art with what is natural, and say that art is artificial and the natural is natural. Then
does quality play a part in this, or is that something further down the line?
The quality of appropriateness, as I've said, mm-hmm. doesn't play a part. It is the basis.
Mm-hmm.
So when we do things that fit together, that is beauty. And if things that fit together and complement each other, complete each other, mm-hmm. in contrast with each other, and we see that the artist is the person who says, this is like that. And everyone else says, so it is. I never saw that before. I mm-hmm. never thought of that before. That is the artist. Observing and becoming increasingly aware of beauty, not necessarily creating beauty, but becoming aware of it and working with it and playing with it and enjoying it and teaching other people. You see, here are these relationships that are stimulating and satisfactory and appropriate. And then the rest of us say, whoa, look, it's true. He saw it. I didn't see it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Then that is the value of art. It is a blessing. It's not just vomit. It's not just expressing myself. It's communicating and blessing.
Right.
And this is how Christians, and of course everybody else, should think about art. The art of cooking and hospitality is to bless people, not to show off. And the art of conversation is to bless people.
Well, this brings up a very interesting question. You mentioned self-expression. And for many people these days, art is essentially a mode of self-expression. Whereas if I hear what you're saying is that all of the arts of human endeavor should be about this relationship and the fitting of things together in
yes.
a meaningful manner. So what do you think is going on with all this self-expression?
I think it's a movement toward death.
Mm-hmm.
It is, as Eve did, trying to be like God,
mm-hmm.
which we cannot do, and it will just kill us, as Eve basically committed suicide by knowing good and evil instead of letting God tell her.
Right. Well, would it not, though, be in your large circle of art?
Oh, suicide?
No, well, I guess it could be. But I mean,
yes.
the self-expression that people are so fixated upon now, or self-identification, that people are doing all sorts of things to, people today often say, I identify myself, which I find a very strange sort of thing to do, to say, I am X, my tattoo or my gender identity or whatever, that somehow we've come to this conclusion all by ourselves.
Yes, I would say that that is anti-art art,
Mm-hmm.
that it is evil.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
What is good and real is who God is, what he does, and what he wants. And anything outside of that is unreal and evil.
Mm-hmm.
I would think that is the basic definition of evil, something that is unreal and doesn't belong with who God is, what he does, and what he wants. So God does not want us to kill ourselves. Killing ourselves is art. It's artificial. We are responsible for it, but it's anti-art art.
Right.
It's untrue art. It's evil art. And that would be a category within the bigger circle. So if something is art, it doesn't mean it's good.
Right.
It just means it's art.
Right.
But many people think, well, art is good. No, it isn't. It's quite neutral.
Oh, yeah, yeah. We forget that Hitler was an artist, and many of the things he put together were
brilliant
a very powerful form of art. You know, all those mass rallies and designs for structures and everything, the flags and everything.
Very gifted and very hardworking.
Yeah. And then there's propaganda as art, which is a very, very devious, manipulative thing.
Is it?
Is it?
I don't think so.
Well, you don't think it is manipulative?
I think Jesus was a propagandist because he propagated ideas. He propagated his way of life. That is the only way of life. He propagated it. I don't know what else propaganda is except presenting, propagating, encouraging, recommending, trying to attract people to something.
Right.
And that something might be quite good.
Right. C.S. Lewis in The Abolition of Man differentiates between propaganda and propagation, whereas obviously the words originated from the same source. But I think, in my thinking, propagation is natural. The propagation is.
No, it isn't, Bern. It's artistic. It's artificial. It is not natural. I really have to hammer on that point,
right?
Which people forget. It just goes past or through because it's so radical. It is not natural. It's artistic.
Right. Right. Okay. Well, that's something for me to think about. And but isn't there a kind of communication, especially through technology, that seeks to, I don't know, manipulate us?
Oh, everything manipulates. Art manipulates.
Right.
Manipulate means to put your hand on it and change it.
Sure.
So manipulation can be bad. It can be good. It can be effective. It can be a failure. Manipulation just means to put your hand on it and change it.
Right. Right. So then define how do you look at evil? How do you define evil?
Well, as I've said, it is any alternative to who God is, what he does, and what he wants. Reality is who God is, what he does, and what he wants. Anything outside of that or contrasting with that is evil. It's not real. It's dead. And it's not eternal either. What is good is eternal.
So how does kitsch play into all of this?
Oh, kitsch is a form of art.
Yeah, but is that, are we doing something to ourselves through it? Something that is perhaps not a good thing to do?
Well, kitsch can be cynical or play or entertaining. And I think entertaining is quite dangerous in itself. And so kitsch can be destructive.
Right.
But I don't think it's evil. It can be sarcastic or cliche. I think cliche belongs with kitsch, but
Right.
cliche just means a pattern
Right.
of repeated pattern. And if you grow your wheat the same way year after year, it's cliche.
Right.
But that doesn't make it stupid or
Right.
ineffective or unintelligent or unworthy. It's just a cliche.
Yeah. And I could see a person who approached, say, growing wheat with the idea of self-expression, eventually killing themselves off through novelty.
That's right. I often ask people in lectures and otherwise, what is the purpose of language? And many people, especially younger people, say the purpose of language is to express yourself, which is absolutely wrong.
Mm.
The purpose of language is to communicate.
Yeah.
Which is not the same as expressing yourself.
Right.
Expressing yourself without communicating isolates you and makes you more and more lonely. And so we have young people being more and more lonely and more depressed and more suicidal because they're expressing themselves and there's no communication.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, that goes along with the idea that you can define yourself.
Yes, it does. Very much.
That I am the arbiter of who I am, whereas we are, I think Jordan Peterson said, we're in negotiation with each other. We're always, it's like who I am in my family, who I am in my culture, who I am to other people. And they see something I don't see. I see something they don't see. And Walker Percy once said, isn't it interesting how you can meet someone and within a few minutes you get a picture of them, a picture they don't see of themselves, and I'm sure people have looked at me and said, Bern, if only you would lose weight, why don't you do that? Or Bern, why don't you, you're talking too much, or, whatever my faults are, they can see them just as I see their faults. But that doesn't mean I can sit there and grapple it and make sense out of it.
Well, identity is not that great a thing because
No.
It is entity, self-being.
Right.
It precludes relationships in itself. It's just self-being. But when Adam was a self-being, being aware of himself, being aware of his environment, having an effect on the environment by naming the animals, when he was an identity, God said, it is not good.
Right.
Because there has to be relationships.
Right.
So identity needs to be beyond identity to be living. And I always remember that the basis of identity, the id, is the same basis for idiot.
Right. That's very good. That's very good. The idiot. Yeah. Well, and I find that our health comes from conversation and dialogue and a mixing of ideas and trying to understand what, even in this, I'm sure we largely agree on many things, but at the same time, even in our conversation here, there are points of like, well, what are you saying? Well, what are you saying? And it is through dialogue that we wrestle with each other. We try to find out what the other person is saying, and for me, in the broader picture of what you're talking about as arts, a person cooking a meal is communicating for other people. I look at all my private cooking for myself. Obviously, I need to keep nutrition working in my body, but I'm also practicing for when I'm with other people and what I might cook for them. And I have to think, if I have, say, a certain amount of people coming over to my house, I have to kind of say, who are these people? What can I cook for them? What can't I cook for them? So, for instance, I had a couple of Georgians over one evening, and I gave them something I thought was really great, a certain kind of cheese. And they were like, ew, they didn't like it. And I realized, okay, note, Georgians may not have the same kinds of taste in cheese that I, influenced more, say, by French cheeses, have. So you wrestle with, I mean, this happens to me all the time here, where there's things that happen that I just go like, I have never imagined doing that kind of thing before. But now I see this is how they do it. So I'm communicating through so many different ways, and it's all, as you say, an art. And do you think in our arts the point is communication? One of the main points?
Yes, and it's a tremendous struggle. And it's one of the places where the devil attacks us most constantly and perhaps most effectively. A handicap to conversation in understanding, as you say, what another person means is that very often the other person does not know what they mean and cannot commit themselves to what they mean, but they're just babbling buzzwords here and there. And if you ask them, what do you mean? They will tell you whatever.
Right.
The road to hell is paved with whatever.
Right.
And often when I teach, students ask, when they're taking notes, they ask, can you repeat that? Well, yes, I can. I'm happy to repeat that. But when the students speak and I ask them, can you repeat that? They cannot repeat it because they were not listening to themselves.
Right.
They were just vomiting. And this is a serious handicap and disability that people like you and I should really be working to help people to be healed from this.
Yes.
And it's hard work because people don't want to be healed because the sickness is so relaxing.
Yeah, and it's so easy to drift. It's like G.K. Chesterton said, a dead thing floats with the stream. Only a living thing can swim against it. And I think it's so easy to drift with whatever the tenor of the times is. And so people will suddenly, I notice, because I have to pay attention to stuff happening on the internet to make some of my videos, I'll notice suddenly someone starts saying something in one sphere. And after a while, all these people who have a certain kind of way of thinking are all repeating the thing, using the exact same words. And I find that frightening, actually, in a certain sense. I mean, it's not frightening to me personally because I'm not afraid of it, but I am. It does sadden me that people. It's very difficult for people to stop. I think it's difficult for all of us. It was certainly difficult when I was younger to stop myself from, kind of saying the things that just simply just kept getting repeated. So,
one of my proverbs is, the world is the salt and the light of the church. And this has been true and an area of the battle since the very beginning of the church and even before it was born. So Palestine was a Greek colony for 300 years before Jesus came, and the Greeks to a great extent controlled the education.
Right.
And they had a two-tier cosmos, and the little Jewish boys had absorbed that. So when Jesus appeared to his disciples after his resurrection, it wasn't within their paradigm of reality that he could be resurrected. They thought they saw a ghost because their minds were Platonic. And so the Platonic ideas had been salt and light in the lives of the apostles and continued to be. So we see in the New Testament, all of the letters, except Philemon, are fighting against the Platonic and Gnostic ideas, which were very alive and well in all of the churches. And they're fighting with all their might and praying against these things. Well, they failed.
Right.
Because Platonism and Gnosticism have been in the church in every generation since. And people enjoy them. And so we must fight against that as the apostles fought against that, but we mustn't expect instant results because they were great men and clearly powered by the Holy Spirit, and they failed.
Mhm.
But we still need to fight the good fight and try to bless people and help people and get them away from the two-tiered universe and get them away from language as vomit and get them away from the various dehumanizing and suicidal things
Right.
that are universal, because evil is universal and death is universal and the devil is everywhere, tempting and guiding people into a condition where he can absorb them.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's a tremendous fight, and we just have to take courage and keep fighting.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, with your experience with Eastern religion, do you feel that another element was added from the East into the normal two-tiered version of the universe in the West, or did it become an elaboration on that? Did that have an effect upon how we see things, do you think?
I'm not really understanding your question. Sorry.
Okay. When Eastern religion, particularly in the 60s and beyond, started to have more of an effect upon the West, did that add to the Gnostic tendencies, or did that add another element?
I think both. But more, it subtracted elements. It didn't add an element.
What did it subtract?
It subtracted relationships. Because the Eastern monism is centered on the self. And the self is absolute and infinite in time and outside of time. But the self is all there is. And that has had a big influence in destroying relationships in the Western world.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It hasn't added anything, it's removed truth. And people are glad for that because it's so relaxing. Mm-hmm. And if all is one, there is no guilt, which is a very happy day for anybody. That I am not guilty because all is one. And there is no judgment. There is no exclusion. People are attracted to that. Or there wouldn't be billions of monists if it weren't attractive.
Right.
And 50 years ago, Christians thought it was stupid. Well, it clearly is not stupid. It's only wrong.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Obviously, there have been quite a few adherents.
Yeah, Hitler was not stupid. He was only wrong.
Right. Yeah. So what do you suggest for people? Like, I might have some of the people I have who are following my channel here. What do you suggest for the younger ones who are this whole world of technology, of the self, of this, in a sense, almost an exclusion from the outer, and a focus into themselves, but through technology? What kind of advice might you give to them as far as?
A basic thing is to find shared definitions of words so that we can actually communicate and not say, for me, this word means that. And you are excluded from this conversation because my conversation is with myself. And if you question that meaning, you question me. And that's pretty violent. And so because of the violence of that questioning, we ignore each other and we don't question each other because it's politically incorrect. We're supposed to accept each other. And so there's no real conversation, and there's less and less real relationships. And people think, well, words are just words. And a lot of times people say it's just words. Well, what else is the Bible except words? Mm-hmm. It's not anything else. It's only words. Mm-hmm. And the first thing we know about God is that he speaks, and his speech has effect, and he's responsible for it. And if we are in his image, we should function in the same way. We should speak, knowing our speech has effect, and being responsible for our speech, which means we will be careful. We'll be full of care about it. And we will say what we mean and mean what we say, but we will also struggle for a shared meaning. So if I say run and you say run, one of us doesn't mean in a wheelchair.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
One of us means on foot. Both of us mean on foot. And we share this circle within which that word goes.
Right.
We have the similar parameters. Then we really communicate. This is lost by saying, whatever, it doesn't matter, it's only words. Then this is one of the main suicidal impulses that the devil has put upon us. And I would say to young people, question each other, ask, what do you mean? Until their meaning stabilizes and doesn't float around in a free-floating anxiety.
Right.
Yeah, I would say language is the main area of the battle.
Right. Right. Yeah, I would agree. It's very important, and unfortunately, we live in a world where so often words are just reduced to signs on a billboard or signs on a website or something. Just a simple blah. There's a word without any depth, without any interior. And I'm reminded of the old Chinese story of two men. One man said to the other, "I want you to meet me under the bridge, and I'll be there. Don't go." And so the man went there, but the man who was supposed to meet him didn't come. But the Chinese man waited and waited, and then it started to rain, and the river flooded, and it eventually drowned the man. But when the story is told, it was always told that the man who waited was the good man, because he put himself into his words. And so he waited there. It might be a bit extreme, but still, I think the idea that there's an interior to our words, and they're not just superficial whateverness, that I think that's the idea behind let your yea be yea and your nay be nay.
I think the point is that there is an exterior to our words, not an interior.
Meaning that our words connect to reality.
But meaning is in relationships, not in interiority.
Okay. I get it. Well, I think we've had a pretty good conversation. This is going to
I do too.
Stop at about 5 minutes. And if I've had occasionally people who I think might be interested in contacting you, I don't know if there is a way you'd prefer them to try to do that, whether you want me to leave your email address in the link below, or...
I don't mind. People could email me.
Okay.
And as I have time, I will answer them.
Right.
They could look at my websites.
Okay.
At the Facebook and the YouTube, and there's much more material on there than there will ever.
Well, I'll leave that email link below, and I won't. Yeah, I don't have enough people that it's not like you're going to be swamped with people.
Oh, good.
Contacting you, but there might be a couple who I think I know there are a few people who find your perspective very interesting. So we'll do that.
With one or two good contacts are precious.
Yes, I understand.
I'm not
okay, Ellis. Well, I hope you have a good day, and maybe in a reasonable amount of time, we will contact each other again.
Yes, let's do this again on maybe other subjects.
Absolutely.
God bless you, Bert.
You too, Ellis. And as the Georgians say, Kagad ik avi, which means be well. And
okay, I will do my best.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
Well, we'll talk.
Thank you, Bert. Okay.
God bless you.
Ciao.
Well, pleasant conversation with Ellis on a gray morning here in Tbilisi. And I don't know what kind of morning in Basel. I didn't ask him. We did talk a little bit before the actual session started. But Ellis will be back again sometime, and other people will as well. And I hope you appreciate these Anadromous Dialogues. If you do do leave a comment and explain that you do. Tell me that you do. I'm not sure. Sometimes I say, should I be doing these dialogues or not? I don't know. And we're never sure how much of something is worth doing. So your comments make a big difference. Also, you can like this, which helps some sort of algorithmic deity pass this on to other people along with your comments, and sharing if you think this is worthy of someone else's time. Share it, and you could even contribute to the channel. Link below, and it would be much appreciated. Well, I'm going to get out of here. It's been a good discussion, and if you do want to get in touch with Ellis, so I think some people might appreciate talking with him more personally. And if you do, there is an email address below. Take care. And as the Georgians say, droabit. Temporarily. We will meet each other again. We'll just be gone from each other for a little while.
A people without history is not redeemed from time. For history is a pattern of timeless moments.